Right here, isn't it? Good afternoon. It's spring, the flowers are blooming, and it's time to call the meeting to order. All right. Now, I believe we have a quorum. And our first order of business, Lucinda, I see Ann Malik on the her name on the screen. We'll need to vote to allow Ann to Zoom. Yes. So if you can see, there she comes. All right. So Ann, I believe you need to request. I believe, and I'm going to turn to my attorney to my right, but I believe you need to request that you are able to Zoom and tell us where you are and your reason for Zooming.
Right.
Thank you. Ann Malik representing Albemarle County, and I was stuck in a traffic jam in Richmond, as I was worried might happen, and I'm about at 20 miles out, coming back to Charlottesville now on 64.
All right, so I would entertain a motion for Ann to be able to Zoom.
I move that we allow Supervisor Malik to Zoom in from I-64.
Is there a second?
I second.
A second by Hal. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Welcome, Ann. We're delighted you're here.
As unlikely a story as that might be, she caused traffic in Richmond.
Well, I hope you're not driving. Just be careful if you're driving, okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right. With that, I do want to start our meeting today, as we usually do, with introductions. So if you will introduce yourself and tell the organization that you represent. Lucinda, you want to start at your end?
I'm Lucinda Shannon. I work for the Thomas Jefferson Planning District.
Okay.
Williams, Director of Charlottesville Area Transit.
Jacob, oh, just kidding.
I'm Ben Chambers, City of Charlottesville Transportation Planning Manager.
I'm Kendall Howell from UVA Parking and Transportation.
Right.
Steve Jacobs, Thomas Jefferson Planning District, Commissioner Director.
Charmaine White, the Director for Albemarle County.
Lloyd Snook, City of Charlottesville. Oh,
And we'll do Gretchen back to back.
Gretchen Thomas, GCHDC.
Okay, and so with Diane McKeel, Albemarle County.
Brian Pinkston, Charlottesville City Council.
Peter Thompson, representing the Charlottesville Area Alliance.
Hal Morgan, the JAUNT Rural Representative.
John.
Sandy Shackelford, Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commissioner, Lucinda DD Director of that. I've got one. Thanks.
Michael Martin, Vita.
Great.
Trevor Henry, Albemarle County.
And I'll move to the screen. Juwan, would you like to introduce yourself?
He's actually on a call with HR, so.
Okay, so he's not there quite yet. Sandy?
I'm
Oh, you're there. I'm sorry. I thought we had two Sandys. How lucky that we did. And Ann is still on, so we know Ann is there. And I guess Lucinda.
Becca thing.
Oh, Becca.
Hi. Thank you, Kendall. You can see more.
We're delighted to have both of you today. All right. So the next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move for approval of the agenda.
Brian has made the motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Alan, a second. You want to do that today. That's nice. Yes. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thanks, Ann. And we can hear you clearly, which is wonderful. The next item is approval of our draft meeting minutes from March the 23rd. Does anyone have any comments or quick notes about those minutes? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from March the 23rd.
I move for approval of the draft meeting minutes for March 23rd, 2023.
Thank you, Brian, and Hal will second. All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please say aye.
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 Any nays and any abstentions? All right, we have our minutes approved. And Lucinda, I'm going to look to you to see if anyone signed up from the public to speak.
Yes, we actually have somebody online. Mr. Wallace from Scottsville would like to speak. And Mr. Wallace, you can unmute let me allow you to talk. You can unmute yourself and you have 2 minutes.
3 minutes. 3 minutes. Matt, you have 3 minutes. It's okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. I was hoping to join you in person, but was just able to make it back from the Virginia Land Trust Conference over in Harrisonburg, presenting over there. I think those issue connections are really important. Things like rural land conservation connects to our transit needs, affordable housing, economic development, and I know that your work touches those multiple issues. It's been my pleasure to be an occasional participant in this partnerships meeting over the past 5 years. This is my last time tuning in as I'm changing jobs and headed north to manage Shelburne, Vermont next month. I really look forward to keeping in touch and comparing policy notes. The Charlottesville and Burlington areas have a lot in common, and I've been pleasantly surprised at the number of colleagues who have moved back and forth between those areas. Happy to keep in touch and share ideas. I'll be handing off some of the Scottsville area partnership to my town clerk, Javier Rodales, and a really fantastic UVA PhD fellow who's helping us with comprehensive planning this summer, Lincoln Lewis. He will be in touch and look forward to working with PDC and transit agency staff as we think about what rural transit improvements might look like in the future and how a small town can be the best partner that it can. I really sympathize and understand the struggle that y'all go through trying to work in a complex policy environment with really limited resources and the structural barriers that you face among many conflicting policy issues. It's been small comfort here in Scottsville to see encouragement like a proper bus stop improvement that Mr. Reek helped us deploy with a monument to local history and a nice bench where folks can wait for the JAUNT bus underneath a beautiful linden tree. And I look forward to coming back in years to come and see that tree providing even better shade. Mr. Lee on the partnership call is probably the colleague that I go back with the longest, over 10 years. But it's been my pleasure to work with Mr. Henry, Ms. McKeel, Mr. Barnes, Ms. Shannon, and many of the other partnership members on all kinds of work, both transit related and otherwise. I'm going to a colder part of the country where the transit investments are a little beefier. The tax rates are higher and they deploy 20-minute headways throughout the region, and almost every bus stop is covered. It represents a different level of commitment, and I've seen that. I didn't know that kind of thing was possible until I had visited other parts of the world. Growing up in rural Virginia, you don't see that, but those transitions are happening, and we're headed in the right direction. We have some amazing expertise on this partnership, and I just want to thank you for all the work that you've done in Scottsville, and say, by all means, keep in touch and keep up the good work. Thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you.
Matt, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your new adventure. And I know that all of us wish you the best. It has been a real pleasure working with you over the years, and you will be missed.
Thanks, Sean.
I don't know if anybody else wants to just say anything to Matt, because it is an opportunity. He will be missed. And you're going to have a lot more snow up there. Maybe you could put some snowballs in on dry ice and send us some snowballs next winter. That might be nice, because we certainly aren't getting very much these days down here. I don't know if he still does. Anyway, all right, good enough. With that, is there anybody else, Lucinda?
No, there is not.
Okay, all right. The next item on our agenda, Garland, I think this is your turn to shine. CAT 2022 review and looking ahead to 2023, which is we're really into right now.
Oh, wait a minute.
So before I do my presentation, I want to bring in Bethel.
Yep. Good afternoon. Can you hear me all right?
So, that was with, Virginia Department of Rail and Public Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. And we actually had a very, very informative call, with her and her team on April the 7th. And I don't want to steal all of her thunder, but we were pleasantly surprised and made aware of that the RPT is going to step in and help us get shelters put in place. So with that said, we'll take it over.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for giving me the time to introduce myself and speak to the partnership. So good afternoon, everyone. Like you said, my name is Beth Ocafiato, and my supervisor, Alan Saunders, and I make up the engineering team at DRPT. And so I wanted to get a chance to talk about what, progress we've been making with the transit shelters so far. Now, Alan and I have been with DRPT for a little over a year now. And when we started, our director, Jen DeBrule, made it clear that transit shelter and amenity projects across the state were at a standstill, including in Charlottesville, and that she wanted us to prioritize finding a solution. And so in the last year, we've been on a fact-finding mission to figure out what the challenges have been, who all the players are, and what we can do moving forward to help. And what we discovered is that the process to install a shelter on state right-of-way can actually be very long. And, once you've identified a location for the shelter, you've got to develop a concept plan and get a prototype design from the manufacturer. Then the Art and Architectural Review Board has to review and approve it. Then that plan gets sent to the Department of General Services, and they have a division that reviews the prototype and design for the compliance of several different requirements like the Virginia Uniform State Building Code. And then really at that point, once they've approved it, you've really just gotten started. And even while that's happening, you're having to work with VDOT's land use office to get conditional approval of the locations that you've selected before later coming back to get an actual land use permit from them. And so there are several steps that require working with DGS and VDOT to get a CO-17, which is the building permit that authorizes construction on state property, and then the VDOT land use permits, and then also a CO 13.3, which is the certificate of use and occupancy that you get once the shelter's been installed and inspected. And so all of that to say, this isn't to discourage you. Thankfully, VDOT and DGS have been very helpful in partnering with us to identify this process and then introduce opportunities to make it more efficient. And so to start off, DRPT has brought on a consultant to help us compile and update all of the existing building permits across the state so that transit agencies and localities won't have to start at the very beginning of the process with AARB and DGS reviewing the prototypes. We'll have a selection ready to be used by the transit agencies. And then if you do decide that you'd like to work with a shelter model that we don't already have a permit available for, then DRPT can work with you to get your approvals, work with the manufacturer. And we're also working on developing a document that will outline all of the engineering criteria that the manufacturer will have to meet in order for that review process with DGS to be really smooth. And then we'll also support the other parts of the process, like communication with VDOT, the installation, the inspection process, so that you get your occupancy permit, and all of those other little details. And so just wanted to let you know that we are here to help. We've already, like Garland said, we've already been meeting with CAT in Charlottesville and Albemarle, as well as other localities across the state, like Arlington County, DRTC, et cetera. And so we're really looking forward to getting these shelters and other amenities bolted in and in use for the public. So thank you so much for your time. If you have any questions, let me know, but we're really looking forward to getting this up and running.
Thank you so much. I know everyone here is thrilled with this news. I know Garland probably has some things that he's going to be able to talk to us about. I just wanted to point out, though, in all fairness, that April 7th was a magical day for you all to have that conversation because that was my birthday. You were channeling me, right? So it's all good. So let me just open it up, if it's all right, to see if anyone does have any questions. Is that all right? Yep.
I have 2 questions. With this new process, start to finish, assuming you got all your stuff lined out, how long would it take to get approval for a location?
Was the question how long it would take to get approval for what exactly?
Say we pick a location for a shelter, and we have all the right stuff, and, you know, we say a prayer or two, how long, like, a couple of months, couple of years?
So as far as the location, or the approval for the location to be able to install a shelter, that's like communication with VDOT's land use office, and that's like initially, like once you identify the location, that is when you would reach out to VDOT's local land use office and ask them if it's okay to put a shelter there, because they're going to know if they have any future projects, whether construction or maintenance, that are going to be happening at that location, and then they'll give you conditional approval. Once you have conditional approval, the location of the shelter shouldn't be in question. It's just going to be a matter of can you get the engineering worked out with DGS so that they give you the permit approval to install the shelter.
Well, start to finish, all the different steps.
Yeah.
About how long would it take to?
So I'm going to step in and say that, you know, we're trying to work through this right now, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get, so we're going to be doing a couple of sites that we've selected, and that the way we do those couple of sites will actually probably hopefully dictate the length of time. But we've kind of put, 3 to 4 months on with kind of our target, but 6 months is kind of, the longest we would hope that it would take to get this process done. That's a long time, but it's not really a long time in the concept of all, everything that she said that had to happen. 6 months is not a long time. And we've been working on it for 3 years.
3 years.
So another 6 months.
Yeah.
So the process you had to go through, and it's commendable that you figured it out. Is VDOT governed statutorily by this process, or is it more their own decision process to consider these things?
So right now, shelters, there is a statutory requirement that shelters fall under, that it has to be reviewed and approved by DGS, and they have a very strict approval process. There are several requirements that they need to make sure that these shelters comply with. And so that we are working behind the scenes, like at a legislative level, to try to make changes, because right now there is a legislative requirement that these shelters need to meet, and that's why they go through DGS and have this longer process.
That's right.
Yeah, but having DRPT kind of take the lead in helping us through this process, cut out a lot of the ambiguity in the system and allow us to move this process a little faster. So we've been floundering for 3 years, and I am eager in the next 6 months to start seeing some shelters get erected.
No, this is great, and it's good that you're going to try to streamline it further. It shouldn't be this hard. But there's no criticism of anybody, Michael.
Don't talk to me.
It's Michael's fault.
It's actually not Michael's fault. It's actually legislation.
I'm kind of teasing here. It just shouldn't be this hard.
Thank you for backing me up.
Next time.
I said I'll get on here next time.
So I get the back and forth, and we're all, we're just all really thankful that maybe we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel here, which is wonderful. Does anyone have any other questions, or, because I know Marlon probably has some other things.
Yeah, we just want to go through the presentation, but I wanted to make sure that we highlighted the group and make sure everybody knows that, our efforts will be bearing fruit here, hopefully in the next 6 months. So we will start to see, the site plans being developed, and then that will be a target for, getting this thing done. So, I see light at the end of the tunnel.
All right, any other questions?
No, thank you for figuring this out.
We're just as eager as you all are.
There are other localities that are just as pleased, so that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I add? Oh, she went away. Okay.
No, I'm here.
Okay, good. This is Ann Malik, and if you would please deliver a message to Alan Saunders that we in Earlysville still think of him every day when we drive through our wonderful intersection and the flashing lights that he provided for us. So thanks so much.
That's great to hear. He'll love that. I'll make sure to pass it along. Thank you.
All right, Carlin, and I think you have a presentation, so we'll go on with that.
So, should I use the policy?
No, because,
That's fine, I'm with it.
sorry, the mouse isn't working.
It's not.
Well, I had to plug your presentation in and there's only one USB.
Got it. Okay. Okay, so part of what we're going to talk about today is, this is similar to the presentation that I gave to the board of supervisors about 3 weeks ago. So we're going to talk about the conditions of where CAT is pre-COVID and then COVID, and then kind of where we're going to go with our budget. So pre-COVID, CAT was operating 13 routes with a span of service from 6 a.m. to midnight. We had limited service on Sundays. We only had 4 routes. We had our accessibility for the weekend routes was about 62,500 population were within a quarter of a mile of our bus routes. 19,700 of them were minority population. 4,500 were low income households. 2,850 had no vehicles at all. So during COVID, we didn't make any coverage changes. What we did is we did reduce the service to keep our drivers safe. So we reduced our service hours from a 9 a.m. to 12 to 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And recently, about 3 months now, we've been operating till 10:30. 3 months? 4 months? 4 months now, we've been operating to about 10:30 p.m. So one of the things that we did to make sure that we kept the health and safety of not just our drivers, but the community, is we eliminated our Sunday service and used it as a dedicated cleaning day. We're still doing that model to that. We're going to hopefully bring that back as a part of the budget process and the new fiscal year. So of those 13 routes, 9 of them operated in the county. So you'll see 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 8, 10, 11, and 12. 12 is circular. It's circular with a dotted line because that only operated on Sundays. One of the things we're going to do is probably eliminate the 12 and incorporate part of that route where it goes to Walmart on Sundays into an existing route. So it'll be operating 7 days a week. So this is what the proposed new system will look like. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means. So give you an overview.
You're coming back to that.
So just so we can get through this, and then you get questions, and we can go back to it anytime you want to. Revenue, how CAT's operating budget is designed is that we get in revenue from basically 4 different sources. Our federal budget consists of about 38.8% comes from the federal sources. 5307 money is a major financing component for CAT. We get state dollars for operating. We get 23.6% of our funding from the city and 10.8% from the county. Once you factor in state and federal credits that are applied. I noted that ridership performance is a major driver of state funding. So as our ridership numbers continue to go up, so will our state money continue to go up. So that's important that we get our ridership model back up and running as efficiently and robust as we possibly can. Our expenditures, so the service levels for each jurisdiction is a major component. Total miles and hours are the major factors in how we formulate our budget. Our full-time staff levels, and we're converting as many temporary drivers to full-time as we possibly can. Fuel costs, diesel and fuel, we have, the majority of our buses are diesel. Very few of our buses, only the smaller ones are gasoline. But that's still a major, and we all felt the pinch when gas prices spiked. We were not immune to those impacts, so we saw the prices jump. Repairs and maintenance are a major driver for us. As our buses continue to get older, parts, maintenance, and supplies continue to drive up in cost. So that's also a factor. That parts that we were buying a year ago, they were like a $5,000 part. Now it's probably $8,000 to $10,000 just for that same part. And we've seen it almost double in cost. And the percentage of pay that we were paying our drivers, we had a 21.3% increase over 1 year to get our driver numbers up. All the providers in here have increased their pay to make sure that we keep our drivers and try to recruit as many more as we possibly can. With that said, our focus, can we move that? I'm sorry. How do I get this off the screen? This piece.
Top bar?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Can we move
I
it?
can move that.
That's okay, because the public just can't see what it says.
Yeah.
So priorities for 24 is what the slide says. Okay, priorities for 24. We're going to focus on restoring pre-pandemic service levels. Once again, trying to get as close back to that 6 a.m. to midnight span of service as we possibly can. We're going to improve service. This was a request from the city on the Route 6, which actually operates to two very low income portions of the city, Crescent Hall and South First Street. We're going to improve the service level there, the frequency there from 30-minute service, from 60-minute service to 30-minute service. That's going to be a marked improvement for those individuals. We're going to hire more operators and more mechanics. Mechanics are becoming just as valuable, if not more important in our model. As our buses get older, we're trying to recruit as many mechanics as we possibly can. Actually, right now we have we've hired a third-party firm to actually bring in some additional mechanics to help us get some of our buses back up and running. We're going to introduce microtransit into the county. That's going to be a major focus here in a couple of months. We're going to improve reliability, better vehicles. We have 6 fixed route diesel buses that are on order and should be here before the end of the year. We have 4 or 5 smaller cutaway buses or body on chassis that will be here hopefully in the next 3 months. So that's going to relieve some of the pressure for us and hopefully help with our reliability. We're going to right size the post-pandemic service model. There are some things that we want to do. We know that it'll help with the efficiency and also helping with ridership, and we're going to try to implement that. And then we're going to add a new trunk route system where we have an AV model on the Route 2 that passes by CAT and goes to 5th Street Station, and the second portion of it will go to PVCC. That will improve connectivity from downtown by the high school and also to 5th Street and also the jail. So
I was going to say, that's one of those by
absolutely.
Jump in and add that. Okay.
Yep. Something happened.
I didn't know you could do that.
You can drag it to the bottom.
Neither did I.
Yeah. You can drag it all the way down.
I learned something new, you guys. If you hold down the Windows button and press either left or right, it'll split the screen like perfectly even.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So revenue assumptions for FY24. We talked about the percentages, and now we're going to talk about actually the dollars that come in to make CAT operate. So our federal assistance is about a little over $2.8 million. We also have in our model 1.78, almost $1.8 million of CARES or ARP funding that we are supplementing the major budget and giving money to the city and the county to offset their general fund requirements to us. We get state operating assistance, $2.7 million. We have a state TRIPS grant. The first year was FY23 that we're using. 24, we're going to use $376,000. The first year was $500,000. It declines for 3 years, and then the fourth year is totally on the jurisdictions to pick up the total cost. Purchase service from the city gives us $2.8 million. Purchase service from the county give us from the general fund $1.3 million. We get a payment from UVA for the trolley services, and then we get advertising dollars of about $25,000. We also, in our budget, recognize almost $2.3 million. That's a pass-through that comes to JAUNT. That's the split between our 5307 money as JAUNT continues to do our paratransit service for us. With that, how does our expenditure model look? So with our expenditure model, we have 5 categories and how we break down the funds. The majority of our funds, as you can see, are in our operating budget. That's where all of our drivers, the majority of our drivers and supervisors are. Customer service agents are also there. That's $6.7 million. The admin is 3.9, which also includes the 2.2 that's a pass-through to JAUNT. The maintenance budget is little over $3 million. The marketing budget is $219,000. And then our safety and security, which is a requirement from the feds, is $253,000, $254,000 a year for a total of $14.2. But if you take out the JAUNT, it's $11.995.
And we can't see it, but tell me what the total was on
the total budget is $14,286. 170, and if you take out the 2.29, that's the pass-through to JAUNT, our total budget is 11,995, 775. So specific network improvements that we're going to be concentrating on in FY24. We're going to improve service between the university, the hospital, and 29 through the Route 5. We're going to have new crosstown services. These are just the things we're going to concentrate on. These are not all inclusive because there's a lot of them we want to do, but these are ones we're going to focus in on specifically in FY24. New crosstown services between from South Charlottesville in the US 29 corridor with the Route 8. Propose improving the frequency models, having everything on the 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 10 in the trolley be 30 minutes or better all day. That's going to be a great improvement for ridership. We're going to add additional weekend service coverage on the 1, 3, and the 10. New coverage along Mill Creek. That was the 2B. That's the model we talked about splitting, creating a trunk route. And then we're going to do anything that we have a couple of routes right now that are 70 minutes. We're going to create no more than a 60 minutes. So nothing in our system will be worse than 60 minutes. So what does that look like? So phase 1 improvements that we want to do, and these are the things we're going to concentrate on first. So coming out of the chute in July, so July, August, and September, when we first put in our first service model, you will see the improvements. We're trying to get in, hopefully, the 2AB, the split combination. We'll have to have some bus stops that we'll have to put in to make that model happen. The 11 with the extension over to the center. We're going to do that, and then we're going to improve the 6 per the city from a 60-minute model to a 30-minute model. So that's kind of phase 1. And that's where we're going to concentrate the majority of our focus. That's not saying that we're not going to do any of the other things that were proposed by the consultants. We had a consultant. We had a consultant come in almost a year ago and make some suggestions about service enhancements that would allow us to improve our ridership model. So we're going to look at a number of those things, but we have to kind of figure out what makes sense right away. And with that said, the next part of the presentation is we're going to take a look at and make sure we get the microtransit model in the county implemented. So there are two sections, Pantops and 29. It's not moving. There we go. Priorities. So we actually have an RFP that's on the street right now. I believe vendors submitted their proposals to us yesterday. We have, in the next couple of weeks, we'll have the evaluation done, and then we'll be able to have a negotiation with the prospective vendor about a final price, and then potentially when we can actually start the service. So that'll be good, very good news. But the model itself is going to operate under the CAT brand. So there won't be an additional standalone vendor that's operating here in the region. From the application that was done that got us the grant funding, the span of service is Monday through Saturday, 6:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. If the county wanted to do something different, I think there was some discussions in the past about potentially enhancing that. The model right now only pays for Monday through Saturday. And the two areas that we're going to focus on, once again, the 29 corridor and then Pantops. So what does that look like? So the state model that we applied for, the state grant, gave us $1.94 million. That breaks down to $1,552,000 that comes specifically from the state for this grant, and then there's a $388,000 match that comes from the county. When we put the grant in, there was we needed to put in we were contemplating CAT doing it, so there was a model that was put in that how to spend the dollars. All of those dollars will now be used to hire a potential vendor, whether it's partial or full, and that's $1.9 million. But we had contemplated using the majority of it for salaries. There's $135,000 in the grant specifically earmarked for advertising and promotion. And then there was professional services pieces that allows us to, augment and pay for certain, whether we're collecting data and that sort of thing. There's just some expenses that we'll potentially have to pay for software, that sort of stuff that's in the model for $100,000. And that pretty much builds my presentation. And if there's any questions, I can answer.
I'll leave out the questions, but I know that many of the board members probably would love to have that presentation. So
you already had a presentation.
I just hadn't seen it.
No, the board, we gave that to Ryan. Ryan has this presentation. This is the exact presentation, except for one slide that I added from when yes.
Okay. Just
I can send it to the regional transit.
Yes,
sure.
That's what I'm saying is Lucinda could send that presentation out to everybody.
Absolutely.
On this board is what I meant.
Got it. I'm sorry.
That would be great.
I was thinking about the wrong board.
Yeah, that's okay. And I'll open it up for questions. Brian.
Yeah, two. One is, excuse me, so the work you're doing now makes a ton of sense. How does it integrate into, if you ever do the enhanced or unenhanced?
Constrained enough.
Yeah, that work.
So
network in the future, which I guess would require significant more money coming into the system to do that. But is this sort of a stepping stone to that?
Yeah, so we are in the process of completing a required TSP, transportation strategic plan, or transit strategic plan. And it will, for us, it has to be done by December 31st of this year. In that model, it's a 10-year window. So we are looking at the first 5 years as kind of like the first phase. And we're going to be using the consultants' recommendations that we worked on them almost a year and a half ago as kind of the bridge. That's the first 5 years. Years 6 through 10 is the larger regional effort that was done by the TJPDC. That is kind of we go from 5 and implement those enhancements and route changes from 6 through 10. So it is we know we need to kind of build our foundation, and that allows us to get our ducks in a row, get our governance study done, everything that needs to happen, look for additional funding to try to move that needle. But in the interim, we also need to be very mindful that we need to get as much ridership as we, and make enhancements to our service to get as much ridership to continue to get that funding model up and running.
How does the ridership piece work? So the more riders, it sounds like you need to have a virtuous cycle or a vicious one.
Yes.
I guess the more riders you get, the more funding you get.
So it's on a 3-year, it's just on a rolling 3-year cycle. So they look at our ridership over a 3-year average and say, we're competing with every transit system in the Commonwealth. So if we're not trying to make improvements and get more ridership, everybody else is. By definition, if we're not making improvements, we're falling behind and we're going to get less money anyway. So my focus has been on, let's make sure that we shore up our reliability, make small incremental changes that are necessary for us to get more ridership as we look forward to doing a larger plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this sounds like what you're doing now is kind of rebuilding in a way after COVID.
Absolutely.
And setting the stage for when this TSP stuff is done.
Yes. The TSP will be coming before, I think there's a requirement that we get City Council, the governing board of, which is City Council of CAT, to sign off on the document. So the document actually will be coming to City Council, and we can actually make a presentation to the Board of Supervisors if you would like to also.
I'm going to tackle one thing, and I'm sorry to ask this.
Sure.
Electric buses.
Sure.
Or some sort of bridge to the carbon-free future. I know that we get lots of push on this from our constituents in the city. I fully understand that a diesel bus may be better, all things considered, for the environment than an unproven electric one that is going to break down. You have to buy 3 of them.
Right.
And also understand that CNG may not be the middle ground that we want. Does this what you mapped out, can you kind of backfill it with different types of buses?
Yes. So there's a study that's actually going on. I don't know. Are Ben going to talk about that?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to talk about it.
Okay. So we started a required feasibility study looking at adding alternative fuel vehicles. Steve McNally from my office was running that. Steve left us, and it sat dormant for about 3.5, 4 months. Luckily, Ben came on board to the city, and Ben has graciously got drafted to help us pull that back together. So Ben is actually leading that effort for us now. We're at a point now where we have had a preliminary briefing from our consultants. Consultants show that the report basically says CAT can't do a full battery electric model. It's just not costly and feasible. The range and the hours of service just don't meet our necessary model. But there are places where we can, and I'm actually going to let Ben, if he will, talk about it.
So we've gotten the results back from our consultant, at least the draft results, and so the next step is for us to internally look at it and see what kind of options we do have to put electric vehicles out on the road, or CNG, or hydrogen, or some combination of those 3. So the next phase is internal stakeholders looking at it, so folks from CAT, NDS, Public Works, environmental services, utilities, all getting in a room and saying, what are the actual options that we have here? And then we'll take those to external stakeholders and get their feedback. So folks from the county, folks from advocacy groups,
This group,
yeah.
And add, if you're going hydrogen cell or something, then fueling infrastructure, we'd be interested.
Okay. It's good to know all of it. You know that.
And then we'll take it.
And we'll take that feedback from our external stakeholders and our initial discussions with internal stakeholders, come back internal and sort of come up with a decision on what the city should probably do to provide that recommendation to council for y'all to sign off.
Any sense of when that would be?
Probably early summer. Our internal stakeholder meeting is at the end of May.
Oh, that's pretty quick.
And then we have, that will be the starting point, I guess I should say, for the transition plan that has to be designed for us. Once that, so the phase one part of the study will be, like you just said.
What fuel are we using?
Yep.
And then once we know what kind of fuel we're using and how we're gonna move forward on that, then we need to figure out what space are we using
Yep.
out at the Avon facility? Do we need to build out more maintenance bays? Do we need to build out more administrative space? We'll be doing a big conceptual design for the Avon facility as part of our zero emission transition plan. And then once we have that zero emission transition plan, which I think we're looking at the fall for that.
Correct.
Once we have that, that unlocks several dollars for us to actually be able to spend on making that transition. So we have to go through this whole process of deciding the fuel, deciding how we're actually going to implement it, and working through all of those details, coming up with a plan, and then we get the money.
But what we did do, and I will say that we jumped the gun a little bit, but hopefully it won't backfire on us. We actually put in a request to the state and the feds to add 2 expansion battery electric vehicles to our fleet as kind of a test pilot. That was in our request in our 24 budget. Hopefully it gets, the preliminaries show that it is still, our request is there. Doesn't mean it's going to stay there. It still has to go through the CTB, Commonwealth Transportation Board. They're going to be looking for the plan. But hopefully we will be able to say we're far enough along in the plan to show them that we have done the due diligence.
So this board will look forward to you all coming back and sharing more information with us at the point at which you all have had a chance to make some decisions and as we work through the process.
Yep.
That's what we're doing.
Trevor had a question.
Yeah, question on that request, Garland. You did a great job at our board meeting walking through some of the presentation. And my understanding of when you acquire that asset, there's federal guidelines around years of service, miles of service.
Absolutely.
So that really affects, impacts the operations. If you're able to get those 2, are they in a category where those restrictions don't apply?
No, it's still the same. So
they do apply.
the large buses that we buy,
So if these don't work out, those are 2.
we still got to keep them, and we got to figure out how to get. So, thank you for bringing that up. So, part of when CAT buys a large vehicle, anything over 30 feet, it's in the category where we've got it 12 years, 500,000 miles. We have to do both. It's not 12 years, get rid of it. You have to have 12 years at a minimum, and a minimum of 500,000 miles before you can actually get rid of the vehicle. So if we buy something and it doesn't work, it'll be on our books and in our service model for 20 years until we get to 500,000 miles. We have a few of those right now we're trying to get rid of. We have some hybrids that should have been replaced 2 years ago. We still can't get them replaced. We got 60,000+ miles we need to get done. And we're no closer to getting those moved out because they stay in the shop more than they are on the street. But we'll work through that model too.
Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Just dialing back to the microtransit, do you have a time frame for the marketing? And assuming you're X months out to the contract starting, you back up 3 months or something?
So part of the RFP process that we put in place, we asked the potential vendor to develop a marketing plan. So that will be one of the first deliverables that we will ask of them. So whoever is awarded, whether it's partial or full, that marketing plan will be key to being able to answer your question of when we can turn on the marketing.
Because you have the scope, I'm sure, that you're saying,
Yeah.
at least.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't think there's a question over here.
Thanks, Grant. Picking up on the marketing, we're very interested in helping market the microtransit option of 29 North, so please remember to, and I know you always do anyway. Second, we still have to talk about.
Yeah.
And then third, the focus that you described for FY24 and such, where would we go to look at the real nitty gritty on those particular, as you know, I'm interested in round 5 and I wondered how, it was a good question, how it dovetails into the constrained and unconstrained plan, but my question is, how does it compare to those improvements that we all had hoped were gonna happen? Are they the same?
They are the same.
Okay,
They're
so
the
I
same.
can go back to
Yep.
those materials and
Yep.
get the details.
Yes.
And I think there was a little bit of finalization
Mhm.
on the Route 5 alignment as it passed by JPJ.
Yes, and I believe the consultant has a recommendation for
Yeah,
that.
so we'll just follow up, so it's best for us to follow up with you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then
But
thank you.
now we're not gonna do every single one of them because the consultant, remember, this was 2 years ago, so consultants actually made some changes to a couple of routes where they were moving them from in front of schools, because that was a different focus. But now that, COVID hit and we needed to figure out how to get students to schools, we're gonna leave those in. So there will be some modifications to the existing plan.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And can you remind us on the microtransit, isn't there a requirement for that funding only lasts a couple of years or something? And then the region has to come up with the?
This is all on Albemarle County. So this is, the first year is from the grant, the second year is on the county, and then the county will make a decision after that.
Okay, so it's a 2-year, there's stable funding, predictable funding for 2 years.
Right.
There's the stable funding, there's grant funding for the 1 year. The second year is on the county. But there's the grant required there to be a 2-year pilot.
Okay.
And then we'll make a decision at the end of the 2 years.
Understood.
And I just want to make sure that people that are listening, because I know everybody here knows, when we're talking about the constrained and the unconstrained, we're talking about options that we're looking at in the governance model of the.
Yeah, on the transit.
Just so everybody knows that was the model for the authority, which would give us dollars to actually improve our systems.
Yep, and the last thing I'll say is, Peter, we're gonna be sending you probably in the next month or so, we need to finalize the ability for us to come on your property. We need to get that in front of city council and then we can move forward.
So do you have it, if you said it and I missed it, what do you think the timeline for both the route changes from fixed route?
So we're
and
looking,
microtransit?
we actually I talked to JAUNT this morning, yesterday morning, and we're talking about September.
For fixed route, for both the fixed route and microtransit?
Fixed route.
Fixed route.
Microtransit, we'll figure that out when we get the vendor. We'll know better at timeline.
Okay, sorry. I'd like to drill into the microtransit briefly, if that's okay. What's the time frame for the RFP process?
Already done.
Oh, it's completed?
Well,
No. So you mean,
they received bids.
We received
Yeah,
the
okay. How many bids did you get?
Don't know.
Okay.
We'll talk about that later. We can talk about that offline.
All right, very good, sorry.
Okay, so as your official timekeeper.
Yeah.
Unless anyone has any other questions for Garland about this, then I'm going to move us on to Ben Chambers, who is going to talk about the Charlottesville Bike and Ped, an update on Bike and Ped.
Yep.
Yeah.
And some of you are probably saying, this is the transit meeting. What are we doing talking about bike and ped? And I will get to that, I promise. And Mayor Snook and Councilor Pinkston probably heard some of this already, but there are a couple of minor updates involved.
I don't know if you know how to do this better than me, but slideshow.
Let's do that.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
There you go.
Cool, thank you. All right, so we're going to be talking about our bike ped priorities in the city.
Sorry.
Oh, good. Nice.
Excellent, thank you.
Awesome.
That's better.
What am I doing here?
So that's maybe.
Why is it not going forward? There we go. All right, so in the city, our bike ped priorities have been part of the comprehensive plan for a while, and that's because the city's transportation master plan is baked into the comprehensive plan. So what is the transportation master plan of Charlottesville? It's a bunch of things. It's our bike ped master plan, it's our streets that work plan, it's our ADA transition plan, it's CAT's TDP, it's a bunch of small area plans. A lot of these are very old plans. A lot of these have priorities in them that don't align. A lot of them have analysis that doesn't align. A lot of them have very old data and a lot of old inputs. So these are our issues that we're facing with figuring out what our priorities are in the city. Also, we have promised too much in the city. When we look at these plans, we have lots of things that, we're going to get all of these things done. We have pages and pages of priorities. We don't have the staff to accomplish that now, and we surely didn't then either. So now we recognize that there is a need for us to look at these priorities again. We got grant assistance through the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment to look at this. They got a consultant team to help us with it, to look through the quantitative side of things and come up with a process of, how are we going to measure these projects quantitatively against each other? And to decide on what projects we were going to do, we decided to go for the plans that had the most projects and the most priorities in them so that we could cover the biggest universe of potential projects. So we pulled in all the projects from the Bike Ped Master Plan and the Streets That Work Plan. We're done with the quantitative side. So we have these long lists of everything that's scored based on all of these different quantitative metrics. And now we're looking at things sort of qualitatively internally. I like this graphic, and every time that I show it, it gets more and more complicated because I add more boxes to it, which is representative of how this process is going. So I'll start from the left and work us through this. It starts with the Bike Ped Master Plan and Streets That Work projects in that green bubble on the left. And the first stage is our quantitative assessment. That's what the consultants did. And what they did was look at 4 different categories of potential needs for our priorities. Suitability, which includes bike score or walk score, that's a proprietary score. Distance to schools, distance to transit stops, and slopes to sort of figure out the difficulty of travel. We looked at demand, which includes both demand between zones, that's what's measured in loads. It sort of looks at zones and movement between those 2 zones. And then we also looked at streetlight, which is a data system that looks at GPS and phone locations and actually tells us where the traffic is on our streets. We looked at connectivity, so segment length and the amount of network that's around that segment. Sort of helps us figure out where you can travel to from that segment, but also is sort of a stand-in for cost. We don't want to build the most expensive projects every time, so this sort of segment length helps us sort that out. And then also we look at safety in terms of crash density, so existing crashes, and AADT, so volume of vehicles on the road that you're traveling alongside of as a bike and pedestrian. Makes it a little bit more threatening if there's lots of cars right there. So that's the quantitative assessment. We've gone through that. We looked at, could we put weights on some of these things? Could we, maybe we take street light out and just use loads for demand. We looked at all these different levers, and in the end, the scores kind of sorted out the same, no matter how we pulled the levers. There's some overlap between these. So like bike score, walk score also sort of takes into account network and segment lengths. The demand of travel is going to have some overlap with AADT. So there are some things that are, duplicating themselves in here, and that's probably why we didn't get a whole lot of variety when we were pulling the different levers and trying to put weights on it. But anyway, we came up with a list of all these projects and scored numbers, and that was great. And then we decided, okay, these are real old projects. These are projects from 2015, 2016. We should take a second look at these to make sure they're still real. So that sort of kicked off our thought about what we wanted to do qualitatively to look at these projects. And the first thing that we did was look at it feasibility wise. So general feasibility of, can we actually put this on the ground? Is this like something that is buildable at all? And then feasibility of, funding and physically, can we do this project in 5 years, 10 years? Is it longer than that? So we went through every project looking at feasibility. We've also looked at the paving schedule to see, if we build this bike lane, are we just going to come in next year and rip it out and need to pave it again? We are, and you'll see these 2 red stars. These are the 2 things I'm working on now, which is looking at the distribution of the projects to make sure that we're distributing them equitably across the city and to people who will actually need access to bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And then the more complicated one is actually looking at synergies between projects. That's both internally to this list of bike ped projects, but it's also, you know, we've got a bunch of transit stops that don't have shelters. Are there places that we could be putting in more transit amenities? And can we pair that with this bike ped project and sort of package it all together and get it all done at once? We're also doing that with ADA ramps. We have lists of, you know, areas in town where we know ADA ramps aren't up to snuff. There aren't crosswalks in certain places. Are there places where we can package those things? Because the projects that came out of bike ped master plan and streets that work, they didn't include curb ramps, they didn't include crosswalks, they were specifically sidewalks, bike lanes, and not the little transition spaces that we need to be thinking about to make sure that we were making those connections. So if you were looking for the transit part, there it is. You'll notice that there's a little arrow that flies out the side that says Sharrows. When we were doing our analysis, especially when we got the quantitative analysis back, all of the highest scoring things that came out were shared use lanes, which is, you've seen them, they're basically a painting of a guy on a bike in the middle of the road. And that basically tells you, hey, there might be some bicyclists around here, keep your eyes out. Which
Sure is a painting, that's right.
Yeah, well, we might get to street art later, but so it's basically just a heads up, and we kind of don't see that as a project anymore because it's just something we should include in paving. We pave, you know, the dotted lines down the middle of the road when we pave. We should be painting the sharrows where we've already determined they need to be when we do that repaving. So we took those out of the list and sent them over to public service and said, hey, when things come up for paving, look at this list to make sure that you're putting the sharrows in where we are supposed to be doing them. The rest of the projects we're going to consider projects, and there'll be things that we hand off to engineers and public works to move forward, to get survey, to do plans, to do engineering. That's what'll come out at the other end of this. So there are a couple challenges that we're facing as we're going through this process. One of them is just comparing apples and oranges. We have a list of sidewalks and a list of bike facilities, and it's kind of difficult, especially when they're separated like that, to say, oh, well, this sidewalk is more important than this bike lane. So we're kind of trying to figure our way through that. There's also an element of different stages of development. We have some projects that are little tiny guys. We have some projects that are half a mile long sidewalks that are going to be really big, difficult projects that we'll have to do more planning, we'll have to get more funding. How do we prioritize something that's really big versus something that's really small and we can do fast is an internal thing that we're struggling with. And then lastly, you know, we'll have our priorities that come out of this, but there are other planning efforts going on in the region and in the city. How are we going to match this up with what the NPO is doing with the long range transportation plan, what CAT's doing with the TSP, what the ADA transition plan update is going to be? All of these things are things that we need to work through so that we're producing a list of priorities here that isn't going to kneecap something else down the road. So our next steps in this process, we're still working through the project synergies element. Once we get that and we sort of have an idea of what the projects are that we are going to want to put on the ground, sort of what's rising to the top, we're going to start looking at how those are distributed, whether we need to start considering other projects that maybe didn't score quite as well, just to make sure that we're serving everyone. And then we'll have a draft list of priorities. We'll be coming around to stakeholders, and you'll probably see me again with this, to get feedback on those draft priorities and see if we're missing anything. Once we revise that list of priorities, we'll be taking it to council for adoption, and we'll be looking at that annually. This is not going to just be a one and done. Like that may have been an issue that we had in 2015, 2016 when we were doing these older plans, that we just said, we've got our priorities, now we're done, we're going to go off and run with them. This is going to be something that we have to come back to annually because there are going to be little tweaks that we want to make along the way. As we discover those tweaks, we're going to want to document them as well so that we know next time when we sort of start this process from scratch and figure out what the inputs are, instead of using Streets That Work projects or bike ped master plan projects, we have lessons learned to go off of and sort of a direction to go in instead of, you know, starting from scratch completely. So with that, that's all of the details I have today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to respond.
That was great, man.
Yep.
And thank you. The study area is the city only.
Yes.
And so, and your favorite slide. And put it up, please. Yeah.
There we go.
So when you look at that input known as connectivity, are you only connecting within the city, or are you looking at corridors that pass through the county, pass through the university? Like, is there a input that that grades a project that can become continuous as it passes through the county and then through the university?
That is
And that was gonna be my question is, and I'll just kind of piggyback on that because you can answer at the same time. We have neighborhoods and streets that you have the county running into the city or the city, so then that's addressing what you're saying. So how are we gonna marry those together?
Yeah, is there
working with the county?
I'll have to look back at our tech memo to see how they did that connectivity analysis. I'm not sure if it included city or county roads on that. So I'll double check that and see.
Okay, yeah, as we know, you can be on Massey Road
Right.
grounds, and you're in the county for the first
That's right.
300 feet, and then you're in the city,
Right.
and then you pass back into the county. So, but and really the point was is like, is connectivity, is there an input that might elevate, if that's the right word, a project that could potentially create a continuous corridor?
Right. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that,
Okay.
but I'll look at our analysis and see if that's the case.
And I'm looking
We'll
at Trevor.
be happy to help with that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Trevor because I want to make sure that we do somehow or another marry these projects and not have them as best we can, right? At least we're all looking at the areas together.
Yes.
And the connectivity.
Right.
And not having that, we're trying to get out of silos, right?
Right, exactly.
Silos don't help. So we need to do this together.
We're into it too.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's very good to hear that. I know one thing, kudos on trying to 3 to 5 year window, trying to get a stable project that you can try to work on in the next several years. Certainly the connectivity is good between the city and the county. Most citizens don't know what the city county line is. And I think I'm glad to hear you emphasize that, to make sure that both the county and the city are working in a regional construct. I think it's something that has been hobbled for many, many years, and that like pet planning, thinking beyond the borders of what the planners are operating. So to have the elected officials, emphasize that with the staff, I think is a welcome thing to hear.
Yeah, that's great, because in our urban districts, I mean, we have the city and the county just run right together, and we need to figure out how for our constituents and our residents that it works. And Jessica would be our point person for that.
Yep.
Ben, so how we figure out that is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this is a great presentation.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I appreciated you sharing with us at City Council, and I think, first of all, having a person like yourself who's focused on this is really important. And secondly, I think the realization that city, and I guess this is just human nature, has had this tendency to just add things to lists, and somehow magically we're going to get through the list, as opposed to really thinking hard about what's the most important and why, and setting up achievable goals to get those done in a 3 to 5 year time frame. That's music to my ears.
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't, our priorities should actually be sort of a work plan of what we're trying to do. And if we're saying our priorities are beyond what that work plan is, then we're not really communicating to our citizens what we're actually doing.
Yeah, when you have pages of priorities, you really don't have any priorities.
Exactly. Yeah, it was sort of working that, like, the way it was working before was sort of, if a funding opportunity came up that said, show us that this is a priority for the city, we could turn to any plan that we wanted to and pick it off the shelf and say, this one says that it's a priority, we can go with this plan. So we're not doing that anymore, thankfully.
And again, as your timekeeper, I'm going to ask you, are there any other questions? This was a great information report. I really appreciate it. Yeah. All right. Then I think Sandy, you are next. MPO Transportation Improvement Plan Overview, known as finally as the tip.
Yes.
All right, so we're pulling that one up. And I'm not seeing anybody on the screen. I hope that there's no one that's had their hand raised
No,
on the
there's
screen.
not.
We're good, okay.
All right. Well, I just wanted to take a couple minutes. We are in the process of the MPO getting ready to we're reviewing our transportation improvement plan, and we will be hopefully adopting it in May. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of give a really brief overview, like tip 101, so that you all can feel like if you want to engage with it and read it, you can feel a little bit more educated and informed about what it is that you're looking at. The Transportation Improvement Program is a financial plan for the implementation of funded project. So it's really similar for those of you that are very familiar with the capital improvement programs that your localities adopt. It's very similar to that on the transportation side. So it's looking at what projects have been approved to be funded, and then how are those projects, how's funding for those projects allocated over the next 4 years upon the approval of the plan. It is used to schedule spending of federal transportation funds. So if it's a locally funded project or some sort of project that's funded just with state funding or something like that, it's not necessarily going to show up in this plan. This is specifically for the federal funding. The TIP covers the 4 years of spending. So the next TIP that we're updating is going to cover fiscal years 24 through 27. But because it's can be kind of a long process to update it, we update it every 3 years. So the most recent TIP is going to go, it goes through federal year 24, and then this TIP is going to pick up starting in federal fiscal year 24. So there's 1 year of overlap, which gives us an opportunity to get everything implemented and adopted both at the regional level and then at the state level. The anticipated expenditures, the schedule of expenditures are provided by VDOT on the roadway infrastructure side, and then by the transit agencies on the transit operations side. The TIP is one part of an overall project development process, so I just wanted to go through really briefly. This focuses a little bit more on projects that are not based on formula funding. So the transit agencies, VDOT as well, they'll get federal formula funding that doesn't have to be as specifically identified. But outside of those formula funding projects, there's a process to develop projects that then get put in the pipeline to be allocated, to get funding allocated. So we go through a process of identifying what our project priorities are through something like a long-range transportation plan, a transit strategic plan, TDP, maybe a vision plan or a feasibility study, something like that. That helps us identify the projects. We apply for funding for those projects. The state approves funding for those projects through usually the Commonwealth Transportation Board will approve the 6-year improvement program. So that says, yes, we think this is a good project and we want to allocate funding for that project. And then projects that are approved for funding through the state's 6-year improvement program then make their way onto the transit improvement program. So a lot of steps go through the process, but the projects that show up in the TIP should have gone through another process before they get to the TIP. The TIP is really the regional entity's opportunity to review what those allocations are and agree that they accept those and approve of those. All right, so there are 2 sections of the TIP, generally speaking. There's sort of the VDOT highway project side, and then there is the transit operations side. So when you look at the TIP, there are going to be 2 types of projects that are listed under the highway improvement side. There's going to be what we consider regionally significant projects. So those are projects that are listed specifically. There's going to be a project name, and it's going to say this money is going for Solutions 29 funding, or this project is going to Route 20 for this particular improvement. Those are regionally significant projects, which means that the region cares a lot about these and wants to know exactly what's happening as far as the funding allocations. But then there are projects that are grouped together based on having a similar funding category that aren't as regionally significant. So you can think about that as maybe your paving schedules or general maintenance or bridge rehabilitation or things like that. Those are grouped together as one funding source. The reason you want to group projects together is because when projects are grouped, you can change funding within those project groupings without having to go through and do an amendment to the TIF. So that gives VDOT or the localities that are administering the project the flexibility to be able to keep moving their projects forward without having to sort of be hung up with administrative oversight and review. So here are just a couple examples just to show the difference. This top box right here shows the regionally significant projects. So Under this project, you can see right there where it says SGR, that means that it is funded through the State of Good Repair Program. The project name, this is a bridge replacement on Route 20. And you can see that the federal funding sources are available down here. So this is the schedule of how funding is going to be expended to replace the bridge on Route 20. Now down here is a project grouping example. So this is preventative maintenance and system preservation. And again, it just shows that there's not a project name, there's not a specific grant program that's listed as a funding source. This is money that is allocated and is generally going to be spent on preventative maintenance and system preservation. So with the projects that are grouped, there might be, 10 projects, and the project's funding needs to move from project A to project B. You don't have to go through and do any sort of amendment. But if you need to move money from fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25, or allocate money from this bridge project because we are under budget, because we are being such good stewards of our resources and we want to put it to another project, we would need to do an amendment to the TIP. All right, for the transit obligations, remember these are provided by the transit operators for purposes of developing the TIP. So the funding in the TIP, and we obviously have a whole room full of DRPT folks and transit operators, so feel free to jump in if I misspeak. But the projects in the TIP are divided by the funding source, so you'll see all these numbers that represent which federal funding source they're pulling their funding from in order to expend those funds, and then the type of planned expenditure, so whether it's operations, capital investments, things like that. This will include the mobility management programming, so we'll have an exciting announcement to share with you all about that. And these are also projected budgets. So we heard a little bit of a conversation here where there's applications for federal funds for certain types of new projects that might come in. So this is, these are projected budgets. This is what the best educated estimate is on what's going to happen based on what the historic federal formulas are, but there could be a need to do adjustments if the allocations change for any reason. All right, so here are a couple of examples. So remember, they're grouped by the type of expenditure and the federal funding source. So this top block right here shows that there is one type of expenditure for JAUNT operating assistance, but there are two different funding sources because JAUNT gets operating assistance for its operators' urbanized services as well as its rural services. So one type of expenditure, but multiple funding sources for that. And then in this bottom block, it's kind of the opposite, where there is one federal funding source, 5339. That's the funding source that is used for bus and bus facility expenses. So you can see that under this one funding source, there are multiple types of expenditures that are listed. This covers the rolling stock or the capital purchase of buses, both replacement and expansion is shown here. But then it also includes passenger shelters as well. So those are all listed separately in the TIP. All right, so as far as the actual approval process, we have a document that shows what all of these planned allocations are for federal fiscal year 24 through 27. This is available on the MPO website. We are required when we adopt a new TIP to hold a 30-day public comment period, so that is currently underway right now. And then at the MPO meeting on May 24th, we will hold the required public hearing. The policy board is going to be asked to take action at the public meeting in May to approve the TIP. And then once that is approved, that is basically our regional commitment saying that we approve of these funding expenditures as presented. And if there are any adjustments after that point, we will need to process those according to the type of adjustment that is included. So that is your TIP 101 overview. I'm happy to answer any questions.
And there's a test about it at the end.
Yeah.
So are there any questions about it? Yep.
No.
No.
So, yeah, sorry, I guess I need to read this since I'm only new to but the projects that have gone in this, presumably there's a backlog of ones that we've been looking at, and sort of rolls along, but you don't start from scratch every time, I guess.
Right, so for example, right now, I think DRPT is gonna give an update talking about the 6-year improvement program. But right now, there are new projects that are being recommended for funding in the draft 6-year improvement program. So that's looking at, 6 years from now, 2029? So that's looking at going out to 2029. There might be projects that the Commonwealth Transportation Board, through the approval of the 6-year improvement program, says that they will approve with funding starting in 2029. Well, this TIP only goes through 27. So the Commonwealth Transportation Board is going to fund those projects first based on either their funding priorities or grants that they're awarding or things like that. And then as we start moving closer and closer to that fiscal year, those projects will show up on our TIP.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, we really like your dress today, Sandy.
Oh, thank you.
Not really a question.
That's good.
I'll take it.
That's all good. All right, with that, she's wonderful, I like that.
He's not the tip, is he?
With that, I'm going to use the chair's prerogative to pause us on our agenda for a few minutes. I think people are watching a little bit of some excitement going on back there. And Becca, we are aware that you have announced your retirement as of June. And we did not want to miss an opportunity to break some bread and share some cake.
And my favorite.
We found that out.
Wow.
So what I'm going to do is, so everybody has a chance to get some cake and have a little fun for a few minutes. We'll break for a few minutes, go over and get some cake and something to drink, and I'm going to ask people to come back as they can, and we'll continue with the provider updates. And the only thing I'm going to request as we do those updates while you're eating your cake is say something nice about that. Because we are going to miss you.
Oh, thank you so
Becca
much.
was at the very beginning of this partnership. You were one of the people that started with the original group of us. And most people don't know that when we started, UVA was a non-voting member. And Becca worked hard to bring the partnership together with the University of Virginia. And at some point, we had a letter from the Muckety Mucks that said, we want to become voting members. And I said, yay! And Becca was right in there helping with that. And so we really do appreciate your leadership. And it has been wonderful.
Thank you. But it's such a surprise. Thank you guys so much. And I have a new boss, and she said to me the other day, now tell me about this RTP. You know, what's the history behind the RTP? And actually, my involvement in regional transit dates back till before Hank was born, to many attempts at it. And so I said, you're asking this at a really great time because I'm able to give you a really constructive update at the effort to write a strategic plan, have a vision plan, going out of the governance plan, having this kind of forum. I said, you asked the right question at the right time because it's all in good hands and everybody has worked so hard to get us here. So thank you so much. And let them eat cake. I just looked to see what that actually means when you say that. I just looked it up, what it meant. So
It means the French Revolution is imminent.
And then I'll ask everybody to get whatever you want, come back to the table, and we'll eat chocolate cake together. And that means everybody.
What did you do? I like your dress too.
we have all spent our together and have all
We're all
Alice in the house? Yeah. We would need to talk about it. Thank you.
I'll be there,
Yeah.
but I'll be here.
Put a little bug in your ear.
No, we've actually done a lot of travel. Instead of taking it at the end, we've been traveling. We already traveled. 7, 5.
This might be 2037.
They live up in Maine. Including some things that are annual, $100,000 for this, sidewalks and that kind of thing. Right. And so, and that's really which has been somewhat ingrained in some plan, some time. But nobody ever really thought it was going to happen. But it actually had the bonds authorized for it. But nobody was going to build it. And everybody knew nobody was going to And, I think we are. That haven't been involved.
That was before he was small.
So sorry. I have no such.
I'll call us back to order if that works. Please continue to
It is so good. Thank you.
We'll try and let the people who don't have something in their mouths start with the updates. All right, let's see. Charmaine, how about if you start? Sure. Is that all right? I'll switch it up a little bit. That'd be great.
All right, so what are we doing in Albemarle? Certainly this entire year, we have been doing a lot of strategic work. As everybody knows, we've had driver shortages, it's just across the board. When one goes up in salary, the other one goes up and back and forth. So we're trying to look internally as to what we can do. I have a number of things on before the board. So some of those things I can't talk about yet because I'm waiting for approval from the school board. Once we get the green light, then I would be glad to share what we came up with and what it is we're doing. Some things will be favorable, some things will not be. But couple things I will mention. We are looking at internal routes and seeing strategically how we can align some of our routes to accommodate and to work getting students to school on time. I know there's a strategy we used this past year with a 15-minute window. We may have to utilize that again this year, in this upcoming school year. But we're certainly going to work very hard to get our children to school and do our best to get them there on time. The other thing, we do have an RFP out to outsource a limited portion of our transportation. As Garland had mentioned to us some time ago, that is a very expensive process, very expensive, to the tune of maybe $5 million. So, we don't know, but I will say this, if we did find the money, it would answer a lot of the transportation problems that we have. It certainly would put us in a really good light, and wherein we could certainly get our children to school, and not only just get them there, but get them there on time. So we got a number of things that we're working on, and I'm really excited. I may not be jumping up and down right now, but I am really excited about our plans and what we have worked on and what it is that I need to present. So that, I know parents probably feel like we have done nothing all year, but I promise you, we have been in the trenches working very hard to try to do what we can to get our students to school and get them there safely and on time.
Can you give us an update on your electric buses?
Oh, yes. We have 2 electric buses. We have the infrastructure in. We had some mechanical issues initially. We got those worked out, and so far things are moving along well. We should have 2 more coming in the upcoming year. And matter of fact, either tomorrow or next week, we have another meeting scheduled to talk about looking at the grant to purchase more. Right?
So your routes that you're using the electric buses on
are in our urban green, because you have to look at, they can't get too far away from the infrastructure. So we stay within less than 100 miles, but that works well for us in the urban green.
Right.
Our routes are real short in the urban green. So, but the only thing, I think someone mentioned it earlier, you put that kind of money in a school bus, you want to get all the best bang for the buck. But when you put it in an area where you don't get a lot of miles, we look at 200,000 miles, 16 years, 200,000 miles. So it'll be a long time before we really get that kind of use out of the vehicle. But it works well for the urban green. So we can't expect to move it further out in the rural area unless we have some infrastructures out there. If we put infrastructures out there, then yes, we are on board. We're looking at what we need to do to even purchase more if that's possible.
And I would just add to that, I don't know whether folks know, but I won't take too long to do this, but the Landslake campus, which is Albemarle, Journey, which is the Jewett Middle School, the Journey and Greer, that campus has completed a master plan. And part of the recommendations that came out of that master plan was to move the bus facility and the bus storage off of that campus for environmental reasons, but also for space need reasons. And part of their recommendation in that master plan was to begin to move the buses to school sites, where the buses to the school sites. And that's where we were thinking about building some of the infrastructure for electric vehicles or even for solar panels to be charging. So that's in the works. Of course, that's a ways off, but it is part of the long-term plan, I think.
Indeed,
Yeah.
it is.
All right.
All right, so that's what we, just a snapshot of what we're doing in Albemarle.
Great. Ted, I see you finished your cake. So.
Cake and tattoo. It wasn't that great.
You look preoccupied with it.
This is a tough one. We're just finishing up our 24 budget. I think all of our communities pretty much are funding us. Greene County, we're not getting quite our ask there, but they're having some tough times. They're in Buckingham, where we had to cut out weekend service, unfortunately, the UVA, but probably anybody was using it, so we know that. They also asked us to charge fares, which I don't think is fair, because you're subsidizing the service, so, but we'll work that through with
Yeah, and alerted us in advance. So.
Who did?
You did.
I did.
You told us about it.
Wow. What else did I tell?
That you love working with me.
I haven't worked with you too much, but I've enjoyed every moment. And I'm going to miss you. Hopefully, you'll come back and visit once in a while. But it's been great to have you around. So, a couple other quick things. We've asked for a couple of technical studies from the RPT, and it looks like they're going to be recommended. One of them is we do want to do a microtransit market analysis, see within our service zone, does that service delivery make sense for JAUNT? So we're going to be exploring that. Also, we've asked for money for a bus electric vehicle implementation plan, and that looks like that's going to be funded. We did ask for a rural needs assessment. That was not funded, but we're going to find other money to do that. We're going to hopefully partner with North Dakota State University to do this study. You're probably wondering what? They have a transportation unit called the Small Urban and Rural Mobility Group. They specialize in working with agencies just like ours, and our geographic.
What university is it?
Pardon me?
North Dakota.
Yeah, North Dakota State. They have the Upper Great Plains Institute. Another there is CERTCOM. So we're looking forward to working with them to help us define what our needs are in the rural parts of our service area. So that's it.
All right, thank you. UTS, Becca.
Again, I can't, I'm floored by all this. I'm going to eat everybody. So don't worry about that. Yeah, thank you. So, of course, we're all excited on grounds because the dream come true of so many students. Final exercises will be taking place the weekend of May 20th and May 21st. Classes actually end next week and students enter exams. It's a very happy time on grounds. The not so happy thing that triggers is the day after graduation, there's going to be a number of road closures on grounds. I think some of which have been shared for months. The closure of Alderman Road and McCormick, for example, both being closed. But what is brewing, just even as I got an email during this meeting, it looks like we're going to lose Lane Road for the summer, the whole summer. The whole summer. So we'll be in touch, but we love our students graduating, but on the Monday after graduation and lasting 90 days. There's going to be quite a bit of road closures. Alderman McCormick, Massey Road's closing for a month, and Glen Road's going to close for 3 months. So we'll get maps to everybody.
And I appreciate that it's at least during the summer though.
It's all during the summer, yes. I didn't prep Kendall, but this is his punishment for, scheming behind my back, but there has been a decision that there's gonna be an investment made in our Millmont Transit Depot that for us to stay there. There had been some discussion over the years about, could we build something, could we share something, could we, what else? But it appears that University Transit is gonna make the investments to stay at Millmont. And since everybody's asking about the battery electric bus status, I'll ask Kendall to fill in the gaps there. We are in the last few months along our path to battery electric buses. Our routes, unlike the city, more like a school route, we do have some peak service in the morning and afternoons and off peak. We are never more than 2 miles from our infrastructure. So, there are some things that don't compare to other larger agencies, but with that, I'll ask Kendall hopefully I stalled long enough to formulate what you will say about where we are with our battery electric bus.
So we have machinery rumbling in this summer as part of Detour Apocalypse to jackhammer away at our lot and begin installing that infrastructure for our first 4 battery electric buses to roll in now approximately mid-November. As soon as we have them and have license plates on them, maybe we can do like a mobile RTP meeting and everyone can check it out. That'd be fun, right? We can go check out the new bus stops.
With chocolate cake.
Yeah.
That's right.
32 seats. So
We could all be on the same bus.
There you go, that's right.
Yeah.
Rolling around town.
What kind of bus are you getting? Proterra ZX5.
And we're starting with 4, and there was, again, lots of talk about, should we accelerate, can we get central funding from UVA, not, we don't get grant money, but some sort of central funding from UVA to accelerate, since UVA has the carbon neutral goal by 2030, and we run buses for 15 years, so to give you guys an idea. So we're not required, we don't have all the same requirements, but we also pay every dollar for the bus. So that practice is there for a reason, to get the most out of your asset. So, we did not convince our leadership that we needed what we kept calling a shot in the arm to accelerate. So we are gonna have diesel buses in our fleet on 2030 when the carbon neutral goal goes into place for UVA, as those buses age out. So where we thought there's possible we were gonna replace the whole fleet within 7 or 8 years, now it's gonna be 15. And so.
I can go into great detail on
It's okay.
Not right now, but if you want to hit me up, like outside of this forum, I can go into great detail.
I will ask you just quickly if it's possible, because that's part of my hood.
Yeah.
And Barracks Road is, into the county, and very congested now. It's always better in the summertime when the students are gone. But if you're aware of a time when it's gonna really be shut down because of the construction or anything, if you could just send me an email, and I can let some of the neighborhoods around there know, that will make them happier.
Yes, we'll do.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great. All right.
I think the closest one is probably Massey Road at Cape May.
Oh, but, yeah.
And that's
And
only
that's
a
not,
few
that's
weeks.
more, I was thinking more Millmont, where you,
Oh,
doing that one, yeah, that's more the area I was thinking about.
That's more like a dust cloud.
Okay, we're good.
And I have the floor for one more minute. I'm just gonna say there are 4 people in this room with whom I've had the pleasure of driving buses with. And so I just wanna say thank you and thank you.
The key
For
is,
4 UTS bus drivers sitting right here.
the key is, would you get back in a bus with them?
Yes. They don't like the driving behind me. I drive really slow.
We try to be nice about that, but it's very true.
Did you have a question?
I was just gonna ask, did you all hit the radio as well about notification for these road closures? Because There are many rural people who come in through all of those roads that you just mentioned to get to other places. They may not live there, but they definitely will here. So as much fun as in big signs, that says don't go down Georgetown because you can't go on Barracks Road, for example.
Yeah.
Will keep people from going the wrong way and then figuring out how to get back. That'd be really.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point. We'll pass that along to the construction people. Yeah, that's their technical term, by the way, construction.
Yeah, okay, got it. Thank you.
All right, Kat, so this will be in Charlottesville Schools Department.
So I'll start with the transit side first. So we had an RFP on the street to hire a consultant to help us complete our TSP. We actually had four groups.
I think so.
You know,
It's okay.
It's no part. Anyway, so we had a clear winner, and that we selected Kimberly Horn. Kimberly Horn started the process, and we were running as fast as we can to get it's going to help because we have a number of studies that are already completed. So it's going to help speed up the timetable to make sure we stay on track and be completed by December 31st. So that was one of the major efforts. And also the way that they put their presentation together, they were clearly head to tail of the other groups. I mean, it was, don't you agree?
Well, and they were doing TSPs for so many other.
Like just about everybody else.
Lots of experience.
Yeah. So we grabbed them and that was going to be great. Now we had a little bit of a blip a couple of days ago, just a week ago, on our radio system, which we had been working with Clear Communications, Motorola to get our new radios installed. The system, the old system went down. We were without, a radio system for 2 days. But they started putting in our radios and actually all completed. So it's back up and everything is wonderful. We communicate across all channels. We communicate with fire, police, everybody. So it's the new upgrades are wonderful and very seamless. Switching to actually the last thing is in July, we have not really focused our efforts on hiring for transit drivers. We've been concentrating on students on the pupil side of the house, but we will begin our efforts on hiring transit drivers in July. So we're still trying to make our efforts to get more pupil drivers in right now. So on the pupil side, our focus is clearly on trying to get more drivers. We have a pretty, I believe, an aggressive marketing campaign that's out there. You've probably seen our commercials on TV and maybe heard them on the radio. We're going to continue that. That'll be going through
June for now.
June for now. We'll extend it July with the new budget. So our efforts are there. We're actually looking at globally the transit agency. We're looking at our efforts to do alternative vehicles on transit side. We're also going to start that process of looking at alternative vehicles for schools sometime next fiscal year. I don't know what the time is, September, October, but we will start that effort potentially for that RFP to get a consulting and start that process. That is hopefully what school, I know we've had cursory conversations with schools about that. So exactly how to pay for it, but I'm pretty sure we should all come together and get this done.
That's great. Any questions for All right, Katie, I'm going to look at you, DRPT, for your update. And you see, if you'd come to join us, you could have had a piece of cake.
We'll have one for her.
He's really regretting that decision when we stopped for the cake break. Great to see you all. I think the main update is that the draft SIP is published. You can find it any of the transit and rail programs on the DRPT open data portal, which I'll send a link in the chat right after this to it directly. And then if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to reach out to me. And then also the VDOT public meeting around all of the published draft SIP will be for the Culpeper district will be Tuesday, May 2nd. If you're interested in attending that.
Okay, that's it.
Yep, I think that's it.
All right, any questions for Kate? All right, well, thank you, dear, and I appreciate our downtime while we ate cake. I appreciate you staying during that time. All right. I'm thinking we have Sandy, you have an MPO update.
Actually, why don't we let Lucinda go first, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
So in the SIP that Katie just mentioned, the mobility management program that we applied for was recommended for funding. We'll know in June. So we are excited about that. And we put out an RFP to find a partner to work with to provide the one call center services. So we'll be working on getting a partner and an agreement in place for that.
Very good.
And then just real briefly regarding the MPO, the one thing I do want to queue up is that at our May meeting on May 24th, we will be having Aaron Belt from VDOT giving a presentation on the state's infrastructure, electric vehicle infrastructure deployment program. So that was part of the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure funding that was approved through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. There was a requirement that each state develop an implementation plan for the deployment of electric vehicle infrastructure, and so they were, after much back and forth, we were finally able to coordinate that. So the state will be giving that presentation at our MPO meeting, which I think will be interesting. And then otherwise, we're already talking about the next round of Smart Scale, so we'll be having ongoing discussions about that, including some pipeline studies that are going to be occurring with VDOT to start preparing for those. And then we will also be talking about the long-range transportation plan, and we are anticipating that after this next meeting in May, we'll be launching into some pretty substantive public engagement with this as well. So you're hearing a lot more about that, I'm sure.
Well, and certainly some of us have a real interest in those pipeline studies because they're critical. One is Old Ivy Road and Ivy Road, which certainly affects lots of traffic and transportation in this area. All right, any other questions?
I'll give a really quick update just because Sarah was not able to be here, but we applied for a technical assistance grant to a strategic plan for the rideshare program, and that is also, it was recommended for funding when we applied. It was a 50-50 state funding local match, so we were going to have to put that local 35,000, I think it was, and they recently contacted us and said they also included in the draft SIP that there was some federal funding that had not been used, and they would like to apply that to our match.
And you said, oh no.
Just closed my gap. So that's in the draft, so we'll wait to see if that recommendation is done.
That's great. All right. Does anybody else have any other business that they want?
One brief thing, because before that escapes, I just wanted to run this. We met in 2000 when the chart, which is now called CTAC, when that was started, because.
And you were 12.
You're sweet to say that. Just as they early but the notice was given to our locality that we weren't going to be getting any more federal money because we didn't have a citizens advisory committee, and all of a sudden, all the electeds at the time scrambled around and rounded up a bunch of people and said, okay, you're now the citizens advisory committee, which was great. We had a lot of fun. We met every month for 8 years, and then each of us about the other things. That was wonderful.
And that citizen advisory model is still, I mean,
That's a new
County
thing,
still
but it's
uses
great,
it,
yeah. We still do that.
I need to say one thing.
Sure.
Our beloved colleague. So when I first got here, one of the first calls I think I got was from Becca. And we've been on speed dial with each other since then. So we talked probably like at least once a month, or probably every couple of weeks. When I first got here, it's kind of weighed off a little bit during COVID, because we were really trying to make sure we took care of our team. But she's been wonderful to work with, a true partner in trying to make sure that CAT and DTS integrate more collaboratively. So I'm going to, I know she's got a team behind her that's up for the tax. I'll have them on speed dial soon. But we'll work through that. But I just wanted to say, I personally want to miss you. and looking forward to taking you to lunch.
All right.
And I was gonna say, Becca, there's a way you go on your phone and block it.
So I will do that a little bit.
We have a mutual friend from Richmond, and she kind of set us up. To be buddies.
She warned you.
Anybody else join in the fun here? But we really are going to miss you. And you're more than welcome. Any
I can be the 3-minute citizen, you know, you have any citizens that want to come on, say,
But only for 3 minutes.
Nothing like 4 or 5. We should know that.
Right out.
That's right. All right, well, with that, then I know you all, it's 5 or 6, perfect timing. So with that, I'm going to adjourn us until May the 25th, same time, same place. And have a lovely month.